Hey there, this is Natalie, and this is part 4 of my reading of Mushoku Tensei Prequel, Old Dragon's Tale. This will cover chapters 7 and 8. If you're enjoying these readings, please consider helping me out by subscribing to the channel, and remember to ring the bell to be notified when the next chapters are up. And with that out of the way, let's get straight back into Old Dragon's Tale. Chapter 7, Dragon Trainer. A year later, when Dora-sama came to visit, that day I was resting Saliact's head on my lap, eating meat together and teaching Saliact words. This is a surprise. Dora-sama looked at us in shock. No, maybe she was startled. She's not someone who's surprised very easily. Dora-sama, forgive my rudeness. Rudeness to Dora-sama was unacceptable, so I immediately tried to stand up to salute her. No, as you were. Dora-sama stopped me and observed Saliact carefully. Her eyes were full of curiosity. That little dragon has become so obedient. Grrr. Bothered by Dora-sama's penetrating glare, Saliact raised his hips and lowered his head, growling menacingly. Stop it, that's Dora-sama. Saliact quickly calmed down in response, however the alertness in his eyes remained. I was able to befriend Saliact. But that didn't mean that Saliact had become a suitable dragon for Dragon Race. Saliact simply was no longer afraid of me. This cowardly and vigilant dragon recognized me as safe, but his attitude towards any other Dragon Race remained unchanged. Dora-sama's subordinates were frustrated by this. Normally, if dragons became obedient, they obeyed any Dragon Race. Sorry, Dora-sama, besides me, it's fine. Rather, making so much progress in just a year. How did you do it? We ate together, we slept together. I don't think it would improve that much just from that. Dora-sama looked at Saliact with a difficult expression. Saliact was quite nervous before Dora-sama as well. After spending so much time together, I can tell. He was frightened. He was just scared. I gave him a name and shared meals with him to reduce his fear of me, so he could open his heart toward me. I see. Is that your method? Yes, it had a track record. Actually, I'd already trained 2 other dragons then, besides Saliact, the 2 adjacent to Saliact. Both were a bit larger than Saliact. After approaching them in the same manner as Saliact and got them used to the dragon race, they both moved on to the next area. The only one still wary of the dragon race was Saliact, the shyest of all the red dragons. I've heard about your achievements, yes. Dora-sama thought for a bit after receiving my report, perhaps wondering if this rookie was telling the truth. If my words were true, then it invalidated the methods Dora-sama refined for millennia. To a young man, she spent a few decades teaching. Of course, that was not my intention at the time, but I did what was thought to be impossible. What was impossible? Training individuals deemed impossible to train. Yes, Saliact was a dragon that couldn't be trained. Dora-sama's training method starts with provoking the dragon, letting it attack, then defeating it. First, teach it social order. So most dragons learned not to go against the dragon race. However, there were rare individuals that the method didn't work on. They'd desperately try to run away at every opportunity, basically recognizing the dragon race as a terrible enemy that could not be defeated. If this happens, the dragon would never learn to submit. Teaching obedience by simply beating every individual of the species, life isn't so simple. The dragons that couldn't be trained were butchered for meat. Is it cruel? You can only say so because you're living a peaceful life right now. Any red dragons that escape would certainly see dragon race as enemies. If you let one escape, it might kill your friends one day down the line. Those that can't submit must be killed. It's really simple. Having a choice in the first place is already a form of kindness. However, taking the life of a dragon that failed its training is a difficult task. The time and effort spent on it all return to nothing. Therefore, newcomers are tasked with taking care of dragons that failed their training. Let them give their best shot and learn that some dragons can't be trained. At the same time, learn to deal with the dangers of dealing with these potentially lethal creatures. Then kill the dragons that won't listen. This way, newcomers learn from the failures, how the dragon we see every day differs from the wild dragon. However, I had a good match with such a dragon. The experience of living as a feral child in the demon world may have come in handy. I realized that the dragon was just frightened. I tried something other than a beating. So unfortunately, I didn't learn the first lesson of this job, that some dragons would never submit. In fact, I still think that way, that it's possible to communicate with every dragon. Alright. After pondering for a while, Dora-sama clapped her hands. You can take care of the dragon sent here for a while longer, Dora-sama instructed me. Isn't she wonderful? Pushing aside her own pride. That was also a sign of her loyalty to Dragon God. Her criterion was whether it benefited Dragon God, and thus the Dragon World. In the Dragon World, there were not many who could throw away their personal pride back then. Use that kindness to prepare as many dragons as you can for training. In the end, she never told me that this area was for failed candidates waiting to be killed. It may have been for my consideration, for she was wise like that, foreseeing a place like this may become obsolete in the near future. From that day on, I got busier. We didn't have that many dragons that failed training. Through various means, Dora-sama rounded up failed candidates from other training grounds around the Dragon World and sent them to me. Every individual was frightened, intimidated, and trying to escape when they saw me. Some were severely hurt and moribund, a reflection of how brutal training could be. I was not able to get along with every individual. No matter how hard I tried, there were children who wouldn't open their heart. It was Saliact that helped such individuals become flexible. When Saliact found such an individual, he approached and said something to them. I didn't know what that something was. Even though I taught him Dragon God language, I didn't learn dragon from him in return. But he certainly said something to the dragons. Something not by voice, but by using his tail to gently tap the other dragon, a sign of trust and security. Red dragons reassure each other by using their tails to settle down, but I didn't know that at the time. At first I was wondering if it was a sign of courtship. Saliact was far superior to me in understanding the human heart. No, maybe in this case it was the dragon heart. Either way, after some time with Saliact, the dragons would grow compliant. Even after leaving me and moving on to regular training, they became excellent, obedient, and brave fighters. The individuals who did not submit, even after a beating, may have had those traits by nature. Saliact and I made those individuals compliant, then sent them out more and more often, although Saliact himself had no fondness for anyone but myself. Because of that, the appraisal of my work also rose, training dragons to submit that other training areas could not. Moreover, the dragons that we turned out were also higher quality in comparison. The rumour of an excellent trainer who produced excellent individuals spread. Rookies that came after me would come to learn from me. Of course, I taught them what I was doing. I didn't think of the method as anything special enough to hide it. Most didn't do as well as I did. However, the number of individuals killed decreased, and the number of high-quality dragons increased. After the new method spread, regular training changed a little as well. My method started to be incorporated into the standard manual. How long was it? After a century or so. Before long, I became known as the expert for training untrainable dragons with my own understudies. It wasn't an official position, just a sign of recognition by other dragon trainers, that someone incredible appeared. A mixed race of demon blood, Dragon God's adopted son, and a disciple of Dora-sama, studied and imitated by many of the younger folks. Thus my fame spread. During that time, living in Dragon God's mansion became more comfortable as well. I felt that I was able to help Dragon God-sama. Every day I would talk with Dragon God-sama, Lunaria-sama, or the servants about the dragons I trained that day. These days were smooth sailing. Everything was wonderful. It was a really great time. I loved the dragons and I was loved by them. Lunaria-sama and Dragon God-sama also accepted me. If I were to consider my happiest and most fulfilling days, those would be the days. Laplace noticed a sudden change in Rostelina's face. Her complexion or facial expression, something physical. Basically, Rostelina puffed out her cheeks. What's wrong? So this isn't a happy or fulfilling time for you? Laplace lived a simple life now. For various reasons, he spent most of his time in his room writing, leaving the mountain only a few times a year. In other words, it's fair to say he was living a homely, fulfilling life with Rostalina. Well, Rostalina, this might be hard for you to swallow, but it was different back then. Back then I had a mission, a purpose. It's a different form of happiness. Rostalina was very sad. If Master's not happy with me, why am I here? Wouldn't it be better to pack up my luggage and leave it tomorrow? But Rostalina, yes. As you know, I don't like feeling alone. My life now is full of anxiety and frustration. I might get crushed if I'm alone. Thanks to you, I'm saved, Rostalina. Master. Rostalina's face brightened. Even if I'm useless, I'm doing something for Laplace. It was very nice to hear that from Laplace himself. But Master, I have a question. What is it, Rostalina? I learned about how you came to train dragons, but I haven't heard the important bit about how you met Dragon-san. Huh? Laplace scratched his spotted hair as he said, What are you saying, Rostalina? I just did, didn't I? Saliact, that red dragon who lives behind my house, the master of this mountain, is the first dragon I met. What? Rostalina shouted, at the same time feeling embarrassed. Of course it was. Somehow I thought of the dragon in the story as a different dragon. It's hard to tie those two together. The lazy red dragon that only eats, won't fly, obedient to Rostalina, is the ferocious Saliact. It's hard to imagine. Dragon-san is Saliact? Yes. Thinking back, maybe Master did call Dragon-san Saliact on occasions before. Rostalina, realizing that she never paid attention, couldn't hide her surprise. That Saliact, master of this mountain, King Red Dragon, might have grown a bit frail, Laplace said. An unhappy growl echoed from behind the house. Apparently, it heard him. Don't get angry. I didn't know that Dragon-san was that amazing. Yes, but that's why Rostalina should respect him as well. Yes, Master. Rostalina gave a loud reply. She seemed enthused by the idea that the dragon she always took care of was someone amazing. Laplace looked out at the window, a big full moon rising. It seemed that it was already night. I'm sorry, Rostalina. I'm going out for a little while. The rest of the story will have to wait. Yes, Master. Rostalina watched Laplace leave without any complaints, for she was a long ear. While not as long as Laplace, she was also long-lived. No matter how long he would be away, one day she can hear the rest of the story. I must keep this house tidy for when Master returns. However, she can't beat her sleepiness. But well, I'm going to sleep for today. Rostalina returned to her bed to refresh her energy for the next day. Chapter 8. Incident. An ordinary-looking house on Dragon Roar Mountain. The girl was also carrying something today. Water? Meat? If you paid attention, you'll find that she's carrying something different than the usual. A book. Bringing the books from the study to another room, putting them back in order. A prank? No. Letting them dry out in the shade. The paper Laplace used was made from dragon skin and highly durable. It could last tens of thousands of years without incident. However, if exposed to moisture and bugs, it would naturally deteriorate much faster. That's why it needed to be regularly dried out in the shade. Maybe that's enough for today? However, the number of books in the study was enormous. It was impossible to dry every book in one day, so every month she would work on the collection one shelf at a time. I'm tired. Rostalina stretched, knocked on her hips a few times. At present, one bookcase worth of books was lined up before Rostalina, all old books. She had the oldest books in the collection out of the bookshelves today. Suddenly, one book in particular caught Rostalina's interest. What's this one about? As far as Rostalina knew, Laplace mostly did three things: heading out, talking with Rostalina, or writing down something. Laplace rarely chatted with Rostalina during daytime, basically always writing whenever he's home. As far as Rostalina remembered, Laplace had always been writing, neither eating or getting any sleep, constantly writing, so it must be very, very important. Rostalina was never forbidden from reading the books at home. Rather, Laplace gave her the go-ahead to read, and to burn it if it gets dirty. But I don't understand it. However, the letters written by Laplace were very different from those known by Rostalina. The writing that Rostalina understood was human language, a language common on the continent and used by Rostalina's race. But this old book was written in a different language. Indeed, Laplace said it was the ancient language of Dragon God, therefore unreadable. If it's a more recent book, I can read it, because Laplace had begun to write the more recent books in human language, probably because he thought it would be easier for the reader to read in human language than in a language that was already lost. But why wasn't this book rewritten into human language? Too troublesome? Just then Rostalina noticed a book she had lined up on one side, the only one here written in human language. Ancient Dragon God Language Translation Manual. A wise man like Laplace would have thought that providing a dictionary would be less time-consuming than rewriting all of the books he wrote thus far. Is it possible for me to read with this? Rostalina took a heavy breath and picked up the handbook. It looked to be in rough shape, probably among the earliest written. Then, while carefully leafing through the index, she read the title of the book, little by little. Dragon. Oh, General. Mission. Part 32. After struggling for a dozen minutes or more, Rostalina succeeded in deciphering the title of the book, Dragon General Mission Part 32. The content of the book, according to the cover. Rostalina had some knowledge of the phrase Dragon General. Rather, it came up in Laplace's story. The 5 Dragon Kings, Dragon God's personal confidants. Laplace worked for one of them, Armor Dragon King Dora. But there was a question in the mind of Rostalina. Laplace was a subordinate of Dora. Why did Laplace write a book about their missions and so on? Shouldn't it be orders? Perhaps the reason is written in part 1 somewhere. At this rate, it's going to get dark before I find it. Just reading the title took a long time. After so much effort, she only read about 10 characters. Before her led over 100 books. Forget reading, even finding the right volume would be a difficult task. Rostalina heard the flapping sound from a large pair of wings. There's only one possible source of sound near this house. Yes, the red dragon Salyact that roosted behind the house. And the dear master of Rostalina that rode on top of him. Rostalina jumped out of the shaded room with a bounce, running towards the front door as Laplace was just entering the house. Welcome back, master. I'm back, Rostalina. Have you finished drying books in the shade? Yes. Good, well done. Rostalina was happy that Laplace stroked her head, but suddenly she recalled her question. Master, there's something I was wondering about. What is it? Rostalina explained what she saw earlier in response. All the books on the bookshelf were written by Master, right? Indeed. Master was working under Dora-sama, so why was it called Dragon General Missions? Shouldn't it be Dora-sama's orders instead? Wow, Rostalina, you can read the ancient Dragon God language? Very impressive. Oh, Rostalina's growing every day, she answered proudly, puffing her chest, conveniently omitting the use of the handbook. Since you read it, then you should already know. I wrote it all down in there. But her little white lie was immediately exposed. I'm sorry. Actually, I read only the title using the translation manual. I thought as much. Laplace laughed as he walked back towards the back of the house. After putting the luggage he brought up from the valley on the bed, he sat down on the chair. He encouraged Rostalina to sit on a nearby chair. Let's eat together sometimes. I'm hungry after a long time. Yes, please leave it to me, master. Rostalina began to prepare the meal with delight. Serving food to Laplace, who rarely ate, was one of Rostalina's secret pleasures. Because Laplace only eats if he's truly hungry, he always says how delicious it was. While Rostalina busied herself over the stove, Laplace's voice came from behind her. I'll answer your question while you work. A tinge of nostalgia was in his voice. Of joy, of regret, full of struggles, full of pride but also shaded by darkness. Laplace began. When I started writing the books, I was one of the Dragon Generals. an ancient story of Laplace began. Far away, a story from a mythical era. Where should I begin? Yes, let's start from there. Laplace. During those smooth sailing days, I was summoned by Dora-sama one day. She was always busy, flying everywhere, so she rarely had time to visit the Chaos training grounds on Dragon Roar Mountain. When she did come, she'd immediately summon me for combat practice, to ensure that I didn't neglect regular training, and so on, but mostly because there are not many people capable to be her sparring partner. Fortunately, I was strong enough to be her match. Are we sparring today as well? Right, apologies for your time. On such days, I left the work to my subordinates and headed to the training ground with Dora-sama, and let her beat me up to her heart's content. I was always left tattered. Even though I could be a match, I wasn't enough to beat one of the 5 dragon generals. However, by fighting Dora-sama like this on a regular basis, I slowly grew stronger. Not to brag, but by then it would have been impossible for a regular dragon warrior to compete against me. I have something to talk to you about. Usually, once combat training ended, the day was done, but Dora-sama said that in a mysterious tone. Of course, I had no reason to refuse. We decided to find a convenient place to talk near the flight training ground. Why so far, just to talk? I felt like whenever Dora-sama and I talked, it was always at Dragon God's mansion, or there. I chose this place since it offered a panoramic view of the city of Chaos. I'm so impressed with your recent breakthroughs. This is due to Dora-sama's teaching. No, you're doing well even on your own, even with things I didn't teach you. The other day, Maxwell appraised your work very highly. I'm honoured. If you continue like this, you will be able to fulfill your responsibilities. The responsibilities in this case are 2 of the 3 reasons that Dragon God adopted me. In other words, reduction of dragon race's hostility towards mixed blood, and improving relations with the demon race. Certainly the task of retraining dragons was becoming very important. It might be possible that as the training method improves, the whole concept of retraining might become unnecessary one day. What I did mattered. I have one request for you. I was surprised by the request. After all, she never asked me for anything. Of course, what will it be? Of course, I answered. I lived for Dragon God-sama, but Dora-sama took great care of me as well. Moreover, a request by Dora-sama would certainly be for the sake of Dragon God-sama. I had no reason to refuse to hear it. Leave your current role and take my position for a while. As a substitute? Yes, I want to ask you to supervise all the dragon training grounds in the dragon world. Why do you ask? Soon, the spawning season will come, and I will lay eggs. The dragon race has a long life, living for tens of thousands of years. Not quite immortal, but certainly a long-lived race. In exchange, our spawning season was infrequent, occurring once every few thousand years. Therefore, during the spawning season, all dragon race of breeding age were obligated to prioritize making the next generation. That's... Congratulations. Thank you. Who is the other party? It takes 2 to make a baby. This story might be too stimulating for Rostalina. Dragon General Crystal. Our spawning season just happened to overlap. Dragon God-sama expects a strong child to be born from us. Unfortunately, I didn't know any children of the Dragon Generals. The concept of familial relationship was thin among the dragon race. Parents do not hatch or raise the eggs once laid. In the spawning ground, there are nurses who took care of incubation. Of course, even though records exist, children of Dragon Generals do not receive special treatment. It seems that Dora-sama had already had some children, but they were all fully grown, working as dragon warriors or dragon trainers. Some even died during combat with dragons. However, this seemed like the first child between 2 Dragon Generals. Strong parents beget strong children, so these 2 were paired together. A child of Dragon Generals, full of expectations. So, I want to leave the training grounds to you during the spawning season. Will you accept? Acting on Dora-sama's behalf and working directly under Dragon God-sama, I was never so honoured. I felt teary on the spot. I didn't realise Dora-sama valued me so highly. I'm honoured to have you select me." Of course, I gave the highest salute on the spot and accepted the task. 30 years passed since then. Dora-sama successfully conceived and moved to the spawning ground several dozens of kilometres south of Chios. I accompanied her on the move. It was a very nice place. It looked like a beehive. There were several private rooms lined up where pregnant women lay their eggs. The temperature and humidity were kept constant in the private room, allowing the eggs to incubate on their own. After they hatched, the rooms were converted to the children's personal nurseries. However, for the dragon race, the pregnancy was very long. It was a race that lived for hundreds of thousands of years. The egg stayed in the belly for 50 years, and the egg took 50 more years to incubate after laying. As is common to all races, pregnancy strongly affects the mother. Dragon race women are especially vulnerable during pregnancy. That's why there's a dedicated facility far away from the usual living quarters so they can safely deal with pregnancy. The change was particularly dramatic during fertilization. Dora-sama had become particularly ferocious by the time she entered the facility. Everything she saw, she couldn't stay calm, so every little thing triggered her and she'd send everything flying. It was not unusual for me to be hurt by Dora-sama, but it was my first experience seeing Dora-sama so unreasonably violent. I gained many new scars during those 30 years. Still, I was able to successfully carry on Dora-sama's work, the task of supervising all the dragon training grounds in the dragon world. I rode on Saliact for my work trips. Until the end, that grumpy red dragon was only fond of me. For me, it was also convenient to visit the training grounds everywhere with Saliact. Saliact could converse with other dragons. He's good at persuading dragons who won't otherwise listen. He was also able to find success no matter the training ground. To be honest, it might be because of him that I could successfully supervise the training grounds. Being the person in charge, my name naturally spread in the dragon world. The genius who raises excellent dragons. As the name spread, fewer people looked down on me. On the way back to Dragon God's mansion, some people gave me the utmost salute. Of course, there remained some who disliked me for being half demon, but everyone was beginning to recognize my ability. Wake up in the morning and fly to the training ground, inspect the hallway with Saliact, and occasionally take care of a dragon who won't listen. Occasionally jumping on Saliact and moving to another town. More or less the same in every town, except making the effort to show my face more in new places. When I returned to the mansion, Lunaria-sama and the servants would treat me to a warm meal. Sometimes Dragon God-sama as well. I would report what I did that day. Thinking back, basically a family gathering. Those 30 years were truly peaceful. No battles, no training, no frustration. Just hard work and reassuringly passing the days. But those peaceful days did not last. The turning point comes for everyone. Few people can walk a single path until the end. For me as well. No, for the whole dragon world. Such a turning point came. A big turning point. It was around the time when the news came that Dora-sama was about to lay her eggs. An obituary circulated in the dragon world. The death of one of the 5 dragon generals, Dragon King Crystal. Dragon King Crystal was located in the northern end of the dragon world, found near a gold dragon's nest, his limbs ripped off and crushed, and his skull drained. No matter how tough the dragon race is, they cannot survive in such a state. He was already dead when he was discovered. Surrounding him were his dragon warrior escorts and the remains of a gold dragon. At first glance, it looked like they fought the gold dragon and lost. However, Dragon General Crystal wasn't so weak to lose to a gold dragon. It was a mysterious incident, the death of a dragon general. It's hard to overstate how important that was to the dragon world. The 5 dragon generals were recognized by Dragon God as the strongest dragon warriors. Their powers were immeasurable compared to the average dragon race. If they got serious, they had the power to easily collapse a mountain or two. Even if I was comparable in strength, I couldn't hope to defeat them. I used to be a training partner for Dora-sama, but if push came to shove, she could demolish me in an instant. So powerful were the 5 dragon generals. One of them, Crystal, had died. Everyone was wondering, Who did it? How? Only a handful of people were capable of killing a dragon general. In the dragon world, only Dragon God or another dragon general. Or maybe following the mutant monsters rabbit hole. No matter how vile and powerful a monster was, I didn't think it could kill a dragon general. First of all, if such a vile monster existed, there would surely be rumours about it. For some reason, monsters only appear where living things congregate. In light of the crisis, Dragon God hosted a meeting, summoning what remained of the 5 dragon generals. I was a bit surprised when I heard about it. I always assumed that Dragon God would decide everything on his own. However, when a major event occurred in the dragon world, it seemed traditional for a conference to be held like this. The meeting was held at the Dragon God's mansion. I also participated as a substitute for Dora, who was still in pregnancy leave. I knew that there was a room in Dragon God's mansion with a large stone desk and 6 chairs, but it was still awe-inspiring to witness the assembly there, even with 2 of the 5 dragon generals missing. Dragon General Sillard, with emerald silver scales and ephemeral eyes. Dragon General Chaos, with black silver scales and profound eyes. Dragon General Maxwell, with blue silver scales and steel eyes. And with the unblemished silver scales and all-encompassing eyes, the great Dragon God. It felt out of place for me to just be sitting there. They all watched the remaining empty seat, waiting for Dragon God to break the silence, the chair where Crystal was supposed to sit. It's hard to believe that Crystal has really died, but it was Chaos that spoke up first. He was a bit of a stranger to me and had the reputation of a stubborn man. He forged the weapons of the dragon race under Dragon God's orders. Weapons of those days were fairly simple affairs. Armour made with dragon scale, or single-edged swords or spears made from dragon fangs. Think that's rather shabby? Well, compared to our present world, that may be true. However, one's own claws and scales, pumped with dragon tuki, were much more reliable. I don't think a gold dragon can kill him. A monster maybe, but I think there's more to it than this. The next to speak up was Maxwell, small and flighty. This was everyone's first impression of Maxwell. Indeed, Maxwell was much smaller than the average dragon race. Besides, he always had this wretched smile and spoke rather crudely. Why such a person as a dragon general? There were many who spoke ill of him behind his back, Dora-sama once said, but those who knew him well never mocked him, because despite his looks, he was talented, hardworking, and loyal. He was in charge of exterminating monsters that appeared throughout the dragon world. It was thanks to his hard work that few dragon race were killed by monsters. Maxwell was the person in charge that went to the scene of the corpse and examined it for clues. While the other investigators were convinced of the work of a monster, it was Maxwell who judged that it was not possible. Knowing the power of a dragon general, he couldn't believe that Crystal was killed by a monster. It must be the work of demons then. Sillard was the last person to speak up. Leader of the 5 dragon generals, he was responsible for the entire dragon race. His responsibility varied widely, but he mostly worked within the city. In fact, he managed the dragon world on Dragon God's behalf when Dragon God was away. It was fair to call him the second in command in the dragon world. Sillard was always calm, decisive, and of good judgment. It was usually up to him to summarise the opinion of the 5 dragon generals to Dragon God and offer his best judgment. Impossible. No way. But not this time. Maxwell was provoked by Sillard's words, and Chaos also showed his discomfort. However, Sillard observed his counterparts calmly and continued his analysis. It would be impossible for a gold dragon. If a monster capable of killing Crystal appeared, the damage would have been more extensive. The only natives in the dragon world capable of killing Crystal are Dragon God or one of us. Sillard glanced towards Dragon God, as if intent to say, it goes without saying that if for whatever reason Dragon God deemed necessary to kill Crystal, we'd accept that decision and action. Dragon God shook his head with a troubled expression. Dragon God would never kill Crystal, who was like his own child. Even for the leader of the 5 dragon generals to even insinuate as such would be a great disrespect. I, of course, kept my silence, for I had no right to speak in this meeting. It was my role to listen as Dora-sama's proxy and convey to her every word. Dora-sama wouldn't allow me to make any irresponsible remarks. Of course, we the 5 dragon generals would never betray Dragon God. We would rather tear ourselves apart limb by limb and tear out our own hearts as an apology to Dragon God than ever consider such a thing. By process of elimination, then the only possibility is outsiders. So you're certain it's the demons? The demon race has long been hostile to us. It wouldn't be strange if they came up with some measure to kill Crystal. How could the demons ever hope to defeat a dragon general? Well, Chaos, it's certainly true that the 5 dragon generals are strong, but compared to the tenacity and ingenuity of the 8 demon kings, even our strength can be defeated. Or have you failed to consider the enemy's capabilities? Chaos fell into silence. The 8 demon kings were the demon counterparts to the 5 dragon generals. By the way, it was from one of them that I barely escaped back in the day. The demon race is not as powerful as the dragon race. They're slower than the dragon race and did not have hard scales, but their durability was near immortal, and they had greater affinity to magical control. The second most powerful race in the 6 worlds. Even Crystal may have found the demons difficult to handle. If it was the 8 demon kings, even the 5 dragon generals would have difficulty coming out unscathed. Or so I thought. If the demons have completed the technique to cross the boundary and used it without permission for this. Boundaries separate the worlds from each other, like walls. Crossing the border means moving to another world. Back then, I didn't know what that meant. At that time, people were researching disappearance incidences all over the world. Yes, it's a study of teleportation magic. Of course, back then, teleportation magic wasn't completed yet. Even if it had been completed, its use would have always required the permission of the gods. Gods of both the origin world and the destination world. If they had a way to cross the border, that would be a terrible situation, but at the moment there's no way to confirm that, not even a clue or a way to retaliate against who killed Crystal, Szilard said, looking troubled. After all, a killer was out there that murdered one of the matchless dragon generals. Be it monster or demon, without assembling a strong search team, retaliation would be impossible. Please leave it to me, Chaos, to avenge Crystal. It would be me to do that kind of work. The 2 dragon generals declared their resolve, but it wasn't for Szilard to decide. One man held the decision-making power in this meeting. What do you think, Dragon God? Of course, if you leave it to me, I'll surely apprehend the criminal and reclaim the honour for the dragon race. Then Szilard looked at me. Until then, I kept silent and busied myself taking minutes. But how about letting Laplace do this? Those words echoed in the meeting room. Blasphemy! Maybe if it was Dora. But you will have the mixed-blooded demon be in charge of the investigation? It was Chaos that screamed, staring me down with his cavernous eye, baring his fangs. Chaos was, how should I say, a stubborn man. Once he began to consider demon race the enemy, he'd always hold ill feelings towards them. There's a limit to your jokes. Even as the adopted son of Dragon God, could he really apprehend the suspect that killed a member of the 5 dragon generals? We won't know without trying. Szilard took the anger like a cool breeze, as if the shouting chaos was but a daily occurrence. I was frightened though. Mad Dragon King Chaos was a very scary person. I heard from Dora that, even if immature, he had the strength to match the dragon generals. It's a waste of a dragon general or dragon god's time to investigate for suspects that might not even exist. It's better to assign the work to someone else with comparable strength, for now. Claiming that I could match up against the 5 dragon generals felt like an exaggeration. I wasn't very confident at the time. Even if he did find it, he'll just get himself killed for nothing. Maybe, but as a member of the dragon race, he can at least send back some information. It's useless to talk about this. Maxwell, you say something as well. As if breathing fire from his mouth, Chaos expressed his anger as he spoke to Maxwell, hoping that Maxwell would feel the same. However, Maxwell said simply, "Well, why not? It's worth a shot," he said instead. What? What are you saying? That's not like you at all." Maxwell was even more martial than Chaos. When a situation occurred, he was always the first to jump into the breach. That's why Chaos thought Maxwell could never give up that role. There's always honour in being first. Do you know how serious things are? We've been together since ancient times, and now one of us is dead. Oh yes? Chaos. Who do you think will die next? Who's next? I've been thinking about why crystals specifically. If the criminal wanted to systematically get rid of the 5 dragon generals, they'd try to get rid of us one by one. Chaos seems to have understood what Maxwell was trying to say. Chaos may be martial, but he wasn't stupid. If the criminal's aim was the total annihilation of the 5 dragon generals, then the murder of Crystal was just the opening shot. A trap sufficient to kill Dragon General Crystal. We don't know what the trap was, but it could work just as well for the rest of them. If Dragon Generals move, it's better if we move in pairs. But that's impossible with Dora absent. Of course, we can't have Dragon God on the front line, so it better be someone else. Maxwell proudly presented his reasoning. As if looking for confirmation, he glanced towards Szilard. It doesn't matter if I die. Well, considering my work at the time, it'd cause the least disturbance. Better than losing another Dragon General. I see. The question then is, does this kid have the power to carry out this mission? You must believe Dora's words. Chaos nodded deeply to Maxwell's conclusion. It's hard to tell how much they trusted Dora Summer's words. So what do you think? However, it was not Szilard who had the decision-making power here. They entrusted the judgment to a man who'd been silent for a while. The meeting fell into silence as they awaited Dragon God Summer's judgment. Dragon God Summer glanced around expressionlessly. He looked at Chaos, Maxwell, and Szilard in order, then finally looked towards me. Laplace, can you do it? If you order it. When asked by Dragon God Summer, I could never say no. Truth be told, I was not confident at all.